We have about 32 people joining us right now. We're going to be going live in about 1 minute.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's 10:01. We're going to start the webinar. This is Dan Orchard with Fishing Partnership Support Services. Welcome to this week's webinar. First, we hope your families and friends are healthy with COVID. This pandemic is hitting home in many ways now. Many people that we know people that have COVID at this point. People are struggling financially from the shutdown and struggling with the stress and uncertainty, and we need a community at a time like this more than ever. At Fishing Partnership, we'll keep supporting each other and working towards solutions as best we can, and we're also going to keep giving you as much information as we can about COVID and different relief packages in formats like this webinar. Last week with our first webinar, we talked about 2 SBA loan programs. We're going to give some updates on those, but we're also going to focus today on the pandemic unemployment assistance that just started in Massachusetts on Monday, and we've been working to learn as much as possible on that, and we want to provide you with as much information as we can that we've learned in the last 48 hours. In a moment, I'll turn it over to our moderator, Tom Walters. He's going to explain the format and technical aspects of the webinar, but I'm going to introduce Fishing Partnership and our panelists. Most of you know Fishing Partnership Support Services. You know we have navigators in Massachusetts fishing communities in Gloucester, Plymouth, Chatham, and in New Bedford. Even though our offices are currently closed, our navigators are standing by and doing as much work as they can, supporting fishermen and fishing families via Zoom and the phone and any way they can get information out or help people. So if you know someone that their income has changed because of COVID and needs either changes in healthcare or some of the things we're going to talk about today, please have them reach out to our navigators. Our information is on our webpage and will be up throughout this webinar. So I'll introduce our panelists. We have Morgan Eldridge, one of our navigators and community health workers. She's based on the Cape in Chatham, and Morgan has been at the forefront for us in this pandemic as it's developed, listening to the fishing community, learning about all the different needs, and providing support in any way she can. So she understands the nuances of the fishing industry because she comes from a fishing family. We have Ann Jackman, a senior level human resources professional with broad knowledge and experience in unemployment benefits. She's worked as an HR manager, serving businesses and employees across Massachusetts for more than 30 years, and has developed a solid understanding of the state unemployment benefit system. So Ann's with Clifton Larson Allen. She's been there since 2018, which is a firm that's helped fishing families work on different financial and other human resource services in the past. Also from Clifton Larson Allen, we have John Hughes, a CPA and principal. He works out of New Bedford, and John helps clients in the local fishing community with health advisory, accounting, tax, and consulting services. And we also have Steve Barkoff, who runs his own small business where he helps nonprofits create and run professional finance programs for their members. He's worked with us since 2015, and some of you know him from his budgeting classes that he provides to fishing families. So thank you to our panelists for being available, and thank you for everyone listening in. Like I said, today we've been putting together the information for pandemic unemployment assistance as quickly as possible. We know that there's going to be questions that we don't have the answers to, but we're going to work hard to find the answers after this webinar if we don't have the right information for you yet, and we'll follow up with people through our webpage and directly through our navigators. So again, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Tom to walk us through the webinar.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. Like Dan said, we have a lot of information to share with you today. So why don't we dive right in, starting off with our agenda. As Dan mentioned, Ann Jackman is going to start things off talking about the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. And then Jonathan's going to take us through updating on the federal loans. And then Morgan's going to be asking our panelists a variety of questions that she's gathered throughout the week from her and other navigators. And then once that's done, we're going to open the floor up to all of you to ask your questions as well. And then, of course, Dan will close us out. Before we get into all that, we have a little bit of housekeeping, talking about the technical aspects, as Dan mentioned. There are two ways to ask questions when that becomes available. Right now, you're all muted, so we can keep things running nice and smoothly, but we're going to open things up towards the end of the webinar. And at that time, if you bring your cursor down the bottom, you'll see a Q&A button. If you have a question, you can certainly just click that and type in what your question is. And if you would like to speak, then all you have to do is next to that, there's a raise your hand button. I'll be monitoring all of those. All you need to do is just simply raise your hand, and I'll be calling on people one at a time, unmuting you and allowing you to ask a question. One thing I do need to make aware is that because there are so many people on here today and so many more that want to be on but couldn't for whatever reason, we're going to be recording this and it'll be out on YouTube. We'll follow up with where you can find that or where you can guide people to that after. But for right now, I think I will turn it over to Ann, and she can get us started.
Okay. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Dan, as well. And good morning, everyone. As Dan noted, I don't work for the state of Massachusetts or the unemployment department, but I have worked with unemployment insurance benefits for many years. Unemployment has traditionally been only for W-2 employees, but due to the pandemic, a new type of benefit was created by the federal government called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA for short. And each state in the U.S. is setting up their own new program to follow the federal guidance for pandemic unemployment assistance. This program is intended to benefit employees who are not traditionally eligible for unemployment, such as independent contractors or small business owners. So, as it was already noted, Massachusetts has just built a new website for this process. Their target date was originally April 30th, so I think we all need to be very grateful and appreciative that they finished their work early, ahead of schedule, and the website went live on Monday, April 20th. So here we are, 3 days later, hoping to guide you as much as we can through the process. And, you know, I'm also going to remind everyone that the navigators here at Fishing Partnership are your partners. Fishing Partnership is your resource, and our goal here today is to educate each of you on what to expect from the application process associated with pandemic unemployment assistance. And then we're going to also answer some questions a little later on in our program this morning. And there are some great links being on the Fishing Partnership website. And the one to start with is a document called the Document Checklist for Applying. This is really the first step to requesting pandemic unemployment benefits. you need to review this document, and you're going to combine it with some of your own personal background information. Think of what you would bring to go to see your accountant to file your taxes. You're going to need Social Security numbers, dates of birth, employers, earnings. I'm not going to go into the list of everything this morning. It all can be received from your navigators or found on the website. So, we know how traditional unemployment has operated in Massachusetts, and pandemic unemployment assistance, may be similar, and it may be slightly different. We honestly don't have all the answers today, but we are going to do our best to educate you on some of the highlights. So I think, a good place to start is that, as you go through the online application process, there are questions about your income. It's not a problem if you haven't yet filed your 2019 taxes. You still should apply for pandemic unemployment assistance now. You can rely on other documents besides your tax return to determine your income or your wages, okay? For example, if you don't have 1099s, but you have a Schedule C from a 2018 tax return, you can report the income that shows on line 31 as part of the process. There's a specific example in the online application that uses Schedule C. And I do want to point out that some people may have a mix of W-2 income and self-employment income. And for those of you that fall in this category, there is a detailed guide to this new unemployment benefit called PUA. The link to that is also on the Fishing Partnership website. But the guide can help you, the guide will explain which benefit you should claim first. So those are just some, some kind of general advice regarding regarding your income. So we anticipate that it should take about a half an hour to apply for PUA if you've prepared and have everything ready to go. We do also want to point out that once you start an application, you can't save it and go back to it later to finish. So it is important to be prepared. There's another important section of the application process relates to some COVID-related reasons. This list of reasons can also be found on the Fishing Partnership site. That document is under the name Assistance Eligibility Checklist. So it's my understanding that at least one of these reasons needs to be answered yes in order to qualify for pandemic unemployment benefits, pandemic unemployment insurance. So get organized, use the links, use your navigators, and that's step one. So really, there really are 5 areas to this process, and as I continue talking to you all here this morning, I'm just going to go through these 5 areas at kind of a high level, just so they're on your radar, and you keep them in mind going forward. So the first area is to apply, very simply, apply for PUA. Gather your information, the information that we've discussed here, the information that's detailed on the website, and apply. The second area is going to be an initial approval. And again, we can only tell you what we believe will be the process, but it's my understanding that a minimum amount of pandemic unemployment assistance, a minimum weekly benefit amount, is going to be approved initially. And this is kind of a low number. This is possibly as low as $98 a week. And keep in mind that that's an initial approval. And also think of this portion of your benefit as the Massachusetts portion, okay? So we'll hold that thought. And then the third area is probably something that you've already heard about. It's been in the news, and we're all calling it the extra $600, okay? So the extra $600 is officially called Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation. And FPUC should supplement your Massachusetts benefit by $600. So following along this example, with your initial approval of perhaps around $100 from Massachusetts, supplemented by the federal $600, your initial weekly benefit could be around $700. And that brings me to the fourth area that I think is important to really point this out. And we anticipate that this Commonwealth of Massachusetts is going to ask you to provide some type of proof for the earnings that you put on the application during the online application process. I can't tell you today how you're going to get that request. Is it going to be mailed to your home? Is it going to be an email? You know, that's something that we just don't know today. So it's important to keep an eye out for this request, because this is a very important section. Because in my opinion, I think that once you provide this proof of your earnings, then your Massachusetts weekly benefit amount will be adjusted upward from that minimum amount that they're approving. And then whatever that new Massachusetts number is, perhaps it's going to be $500 for you. Then the $600 federal will be layered on top of that. So now your weekly benefit may be $1,100. So I'm calling that fourth area verification, because that is really, I think, going to be an important part of the process. And then the last area that I'm going to mention to you is called recertification. For regular unemployment and for this new pandemic unemployment, there is going to be a requirement that you log on to the website every week and certify that you are still not working, you're still affected by COVID. I can't even tell you what the questions are going to be yet, but there will be just a few questions, maybe like 3 to 5 questions, and you need to do that every week. So that's probably the last step, and a very important one to keep the funds continuing to be available to you. So that really is, my understanding of how this whole process can be broken down into manageable pieces. And again, your navigators can help you. So we've talked here about 2 programs. Our goal was originally the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, which is clearly the topic, but the extra $600 is the second federal program, so we've covered that as well. And, really none of us know today where the COVID virus will take us. I know we all hope that it's on the downturn and that the cases will continue, will soon start declining. And, everyone is adjusting. We're all adjusting in our personal lives and our work lives in ways that we never imagined. So, we will be able to hopefully be able to answer some questions later on in this hour. And I thank everyone for listening this morning, and I wish all of you a wonderful day. So thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. That's great information that I'm sure a lot of us were needing to hear. Why don't we turn things over now to Jonathan, who's going to give us an update on our federal loan programs. Take it away, John.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Ann. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to join you again this week. like many folks, I haven't had the opportunity to leave the house and certainly haven't socialized in a while. So I very much appreciate the company here this morning. So I'm going to provide just an overview, a brief overview of the federal loan programs. We did talk about these a little bit last week. I had the privilege of joining Steve Barkoff, who is with us this morning and will help us to answer some questions. So I'm going to provide a brief overview of the two programs, and as you may have heard, there was some good news yesterday. The U.S. Senate approved some additional funding for these two programs. The programs are the Payroll Protection Program loans and the Economic Injury Disaster loans, which is also referred to as the EIDL. So the Senate approved $310 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program loan and another $50 billion for the Economic Injury Disaster loan. Now, that legislation still needs to be passed by the House and then signed into law by the President, but we are optimistic that that will happen later this week. So it's very timely to be talking about these programs now, because we want to encourage you, if you haven't applied for these programs, to be thinking about getting your information together to submit an application. And this is something that your Fishing Partnership navigators can assist you with. So a brief summary of the two loan programs. We'll start with the Paycheck Protection Program. This is a loan program that is administered through your local banking relationship. That could be a bank or a credit union, as long as they are an SBA, Small Business Administration, approved lender. This program is intended to cover payroll costs for a period of 8 weeks. What's unique about this program, and also the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, is that self-employed individuals and independent contractors are in fact eligible to participate in these loan programs. And in the past, programs like this have been reserved for businesses that have employees, and businesses are certainly eligible to participate in these loan programs as well. However, they are opened up to self-employed individuals and independent contractors, so certainly relevant to many of the fishing families. So the Paycheck Protection Program would cover 8 weeks of payroll costs. It would be forgivable if certain conditions are met, which primarily involve using the money for payroll. For self-employed individuals, it would cover 8 weeks of self-employed income, and also would cover health insurance costs during that period, and also retirement plan contributions. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program loan, and how you would apply as a self-employed individual. But I'll first give just a little bit of background on the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. That one is, again, referred to as the EIDL loan. So we've got a lot of acronyms here. We've got the EIDL and the PPP. So the EIDL is different than the PPP in that you would apply directly through the Small Business Administration online through their website. This is a loan. This isn't forgiven like the PPP is eligible to be forgiven, again, if those funds are used for payroll and some other eligible costs. But the EIDL loan would provide funds that can be used for working capital. So really any short-term expenses that you might have, including payments on debt that existed prior to the COVID-19 outbreak. You could also use it to pay things like boat slips, bait, fuel, and again, boat payments or payments on bank loans. This would be a loan that is based on your economic needs. So very different than most loan programs where you would specify how much money you're looking to borrow. In this case, the Small Business Administration is going to work with you to determine what is needed for working capital, and that's going to set the amount of your loan. But this would be a loan with an up to 30-year payment term at 3.75% interest. There's also an option to defer the payments for 12 months. So this would have to be repaid in the future, but it would provide a great option for cash flow in the short term to help you cover those ongoing expenses. Along with this loan, there's also an emergency grant, which is up to $10,000. It's $1,000 per employee. And we are just in the past week or so starting to hear from some fishing families who applied for this loan and are starting to receive some of those payments. So again, the two loans are the EIDL loan and the PPP. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the PPP and how to apply if you are self-employed or an independent contractor. So the important thing here, if you haven't applied, is to be gathering the information that's needed to submit an application and talking to your bank, talking to your credit union. If you don't have a commercial banking relationship, I would encourage you to reach out to your navigator and we can help make a connection for you. But you want to be getting prepared to submit an application. As I mentioned, the Senate approved an additional $310 billion. I mean, these numbers are crazy. They apparently have a lot of ink to keep printing the money, but it sounds like a lot of money, $310 billion. However, when the first phase of this program was approved a couple of weeks ago, about $50 billion a day in loans were being processed. So this money ran out within a couple of weeks, and this is why we're in the situation here where the Senate passed additional funding. So, we want to encourage you to get the information ready to submit your application. Now is certainly the time to do that, as it looks like this additional funding will be coming through shortly. So you ask, what do you need to do to submit an application as an independent contractor? Well, this is going to be based on your Schedule C self-employment income. So the big requirement for applying is either that you have a copy of your 2019 tax return that has been filed. This would be your individual return, your Form 1040. So you need to either have your 2019 tax return filed, or you need to have a draft of your Schedule C, which is where you'd report your self-employment or independent contractor earnings. And the amount of this loan is going to be based on your self-employment income that's reported on Schedule C. You're going to be eligible for 2.5 months worth of your average earnings for 2019. There are some options to do a seasonal calculation as well. But it's essentially going to be 2.5 months worth of self-employment earnings. You will need that filed tax return or a draft of the Schedule C for 2019. The other information that will be required that you want to start gathering would be Form 1099s that you received for payments, and also to have copies of bank statements available, and have really information that supports that you are that you were self-employed. So the big things, the 1099s, and the bank statements for 2019. So the way this program would work is you would apply. The loan would be based on 2.5 months worth of self-employed earnings. It's intended to cover 8 weeks of pay, self-employed earnings, and then there would also be an additional half month that you could use for other eligible costs, which would include utilities, rent, and this would also include interest on debt payments. In summary, I think that both these programs have benefits. You are eligible to apply for both loans. The EIDL is for your working capital, your short-term expenses. The PPP loan, Paycheck Protection Program, is intended to cover that 2 months worth of earnings and some other eligible expenses. That one would be forgiven if you do, in fact, use the money for those purposes. And I'm looking forward to answering some questions on the federal loan programs, and excited to answer some questions on the unemployment assistance. But on these loan programs, I would encourage you, if you haven't applied, to be seriously thinking about that now and getting your information ready. And we're here to help. Your navigators are here to help you through that process.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that information. And as you mentioned, we'll be opening things up to questions right now. I'm going to turn things over to Morgan. One update, we have a lot of people joining us today. So originally at the start of the podcast, of the webinar, I told you that we were going to be fielding questions from raising your hand and Q&A. I think because we have so many people joining us today that we're going to just kind of streamline that. So if you have any questions at all, just go into the Q&A. Morgan's going to start things off now, fielding some questions that she's gathered. And once she's gone through those, she'll open things up to let everybody know when it's going to be a good time to ask your questions. We're going to try and get to as many of them as we can today. In the event that we don't, by all means, we have a variety of resources that I'll be showing you on the slides at the end of this presentation. So you'll be able to reach out to your navigators, go to the website, Fishing Partnership, or the COVID page to get those answers. We want to make sure that we get all your questions answered. So Morgan, with that, why don't we turn things over to you? Morgan, are you there? We might have.
I'm so sorry. No, I'm here.
I kind of figured that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I can't read my lips. I'm sorry.
No.
I just, so what I was saying is that, as Jonathan and Ann had said, your navigators are here for you. Our contact information will be on the last slide, and you can contact any of us. We're happy to help you. And as these things are coming out, we are learning how to work through them, and we're happy to walk through anything that you have that you need help with. And I want to start off by answering, or at least addressing, one of the questions that we as navigators can answer. And that has to do with health insurance, because as many of you know, we are navigators for the Health Connector and Mass Health. And one of the questions that has come up about the unemployment income, how would the additional $600 affect my eligibility for health insurance, and how would that affect the premiums that you're paying if you are? So one thing that we can say is that we do not have any formal guidance on how the Health Connector will be addressing this. But as far as Mass Health goes, they have communicated that the $600, the extra $600, should not be counted towards your income. But for anyone that is on Connector Care or Health Connector QHP receiving tax credits, we have heard that information that should be counted towards your income. And that could result in a higher premium, monthly premium for you. So just encouraging anybody that is receiving the extra $600 and is on a state plan to please contact us, and we can certainly help you with adjusting your income for your application. And so now to get to some of the questions that are coming in that from people is that Jim has asked, if line 31 is blank on your taxes, what is the number you should use for, I believe he's talking about unemployment, for the unemployment. And
I think you're muted. If you want to chime in on that one, I don't know if you can answer that one.
Absolutely. I was muted. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So line 31 is blank, so there is no income listed on line 31. That's the question.
Yeah.
I have not seen that question yet from the Massachusetts Department of Unemployment Assistance. We can certainly, if the person would like to, add an email address to the question, we can certainly try to respond to that outside.
Okay, yeah, he's just chimed back in to say that he is an LLC, S-Corp. So he ends up, taking money at the end of the year. So it's not a Schedule C income. It's not a self-employed income. It's from an LLC.
Morgan, I would say in regards to the loan programs, which may be an option. So for the payroll protection program loan as an LLC, you would be eligible for up to $100,000 in annual wages, which, you'd calculate those earnings on a monthly basis. And the loan would be determined at 2.5 times that monthly amount. So, if you were an LLC and was the only employee, essentially self-employed, I know that the PPP is something that he would be eligible for and potentially could provide that 8 weeks worth of income.
Okay. Jim, I'll end up getting back to you about the unemployment part. We'll send that, we'll follow up on that for you. The next question is from Scott. He says, hi, can you use your 2018 Schedule C for the federal loan? My taxes are not complete for this year. Thank you.
Yeah, Scott, that's a great question, and one that I think many folks have. So you cannot use your 2018 Schedule C. However, your 2019 taxes do not need to be filed. You do need to have a draft of your Schedule C. So I would encourage you to be working with your accountant to get a draft of that Schedule C prepared so that you're eligible to apply for the loan.
Thank you. The next question is from Lisa. If I am fishing, but not as often as in a typical year due to higher costs, less savings to pay help and other expenses, and lower prices, can I still file for PUA to supplement income?
I can try to answer that. That's a great question, and we've seen that before. And what I've seen, and I can only refer back to my experience with regular unemployment benefits, which we're not talking about here. We're talking about the new pandemic unemployment benefits. And I have not seen specific guidance about this exact question yet. However, I do want to try to provide an answer. So for regular unemployment benefits, if somebody has some earnings from fishing, as you say in this example, for regular unemployment, if the earnings are less than a third of your weekly benefit, the state benefit we're talking about, not the federal additional benefit, then your weekly benefit is not changed. However, if your earnings on top of your weekly unemployment benefit are greater than a third of your weekly state benefit, then the weekly benefit is reduced by those earnings. So I think that what would be really helpful would be that we can put together an example of this and put it up on the website. I think that would be really helpful. But, to go a little deeper into this question, can I still file? I think that anyone who thinks they may be eligible should file. We can't tell you, oh, don't file, you won't get it. It's really the state of Massachusetts is the only party who can say, okay, Lisa, you are going to be eligible for this benefit, and maybe you'll be eligible for a month or 4 weeks or something, and then your earnings will change and you will no longer be eligible. But for a certain period of time, it may certainly be worthwhile. I hope that answered the question.
And the next question comes from Greg. Self-employed people's income is based on adjusted gross income after expenses are deducted out. If you get accepted for unemployment, can you still operate your boat to try to get money to cover expenses as long as you don't earn a paycheck?
I think that's kind of a similar answer to a similar question to the one we just answered.
Okay. And then the second part of his question is, if you are a self-employed fisherman, can you be getting the PPP loan and unemployment? He says, I would assume the answer is no, but that's a very common question we've gotten.
Yeah, great question. And, we really wish that we had a clear and decisive answer to that. That's something that hasn't been determined yet. We'll certainly provide updates when that information becomes available. I would say it's safe to say that you wouldn't be able to take advantage of both programs at the same time. However, we'd like to get clarification on whether you could use the PPP and then, what happens after those funds are exhausted, if you'd be able to get unemployment. Unfortunately, we just don't have a clear answer to that at the moment. One thing that I would throw out there as a suggestion would be to, go ahead and start the application process. You certainly could decide that, you don't want to move forward with the PPP, and there is, a little bit of a lag time there between when you submit the application to, when you'd be approved and eligible to close. So that may be an option to consider while we're still trying to determine the answer.
And the next question comes from Peter. any news on how or when NOAA will calculate losses for federal fisheries disaster relief? How about news about how they will distribute those funds? I don't think we have any information on that yet, Peter. I know we do have some people working on that. I just don't have any information on it right now. But we can follow up with you.
At this time, Morgan, it's probably a good point to reiterate that any of the questions that we haven't been able to field, or we'll be getting in touch with people again. And if there are any questions that aren't answered, to reach out to your navigators, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Morgan, were there any questions that came in to you or to other navigators that we could discuss here today?
I believe that we answered a lot of those already in the initial
Great.
part of the, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think there's one question I could mention, if that would be helpful. We saw several people ask about whether unemployment benefits are taxable, and they are taxable. So when you sign up, when you go through the process, you probably will be prompted to elect withholdings, both federal, and state withholdings, and that's just a best practice, so that as you get towards the end of the year, you've paid in some taxes towards to help defray what you may owe.
Awesome. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you, Ann. And then there's a couple more questions that have come in. I read on the internet, this is from Greg again, I read on the internet a lot of big businesses applied for and got PPP. Did they change the eligibility requirements for refunding of PPP to include language that would only qualify businesses that were significantly affected? It seems to me a lot of big companies drained the funds.
Yeah, Greg, that's a great question, and certainly a concern that many of us have. The program itself it's for employers that have 500 or fewer employees. However, there is an exception there for businesses in certain industries, including hospitality, and I think that's a lot of what has been covered in the press. So I don't know the answer to your question. I think there is going to be pressure on organizations that didn't, suffer an economic downturn as a result of COVID-19 to return some of these funds. I know that the president has spoken about that. When you submit the application, you are required to certify that you have been economically impacted by COVID-19. And I think that, most everyone, unless you're Amazon or Walmart or, Netflix, can probably say that that's the case. So it'll be interesting to see in this new legislation if there's anything that's done to, try to focus the funds on getting out to the intended recipients, which are, Greg, really are folks like yourself and, small business owners and independent contractors. So, I would hope that there's some additional guidelines put in place. I'm not sure if that is the case or not, but great question.
Okay. Sorry, there's one question that just came in from Jay. And I believe he's addressing the PPP, not the unemployment. And it says, is the first $10,000 of the PPP still considered a grant? I think there's some, so yeah, that's part of the EID, right?
Yeah, that's right, Morgan. So that is, that's part of the EID loan, and that is considered a grant. So, our understanding is that that money would be not, you don't have to repay it, and it wouldn't be taxable income.
Okay. The next question is from Mike. I received the initial $1,000 from the EIDL. Do you have any word on what the next step in the process is?
So, Mike, great question. You will be contacted by someone from the Small Business Administration in regards to some additional documentation that's required for the loan. You can think of it as a two-phase process. So that's great to hear that you received the funding and, you made your way through phase one of the process. Now, in phase two, this additional information is going to help to determine the amount of the loan that you'd be eligible for. So it's essentially trying to determine what the economic need is to help you through COVID-19, which, is kind of a loaded question in itself, right? Because nobody really knows what the duration or impact of this is going to be. What we have heard is that the SBA, Small Business Administration, is backed up quite a bit. Certainly understandable. There's a lot of business owners and contractors out there that are looking for help. So there's been quite a delay here in moving forward with these loans. So it's great that you got here to phase two, and I expect that you're going to be contacted shortly. We do have some information on the forms and things like that may be required in the next phase of the application that I'd be happy to share with you. But I think what you need to do is kind of hold tight here and wait to be contacted by someone from the Small Business Administration, and they'll give you instructions on what you need to do next, and hopefully that's sooner rather than later.
And as far as waiting on that, we also can help you with the phone numbers or emails for the SBA if you need them. I can put them in the chat section of this webinar if you'd like, for everybody can see. You can also contact them if you'd like to find out if they already know what the next step is for you. As long as you have your confirmation number, I'm sure you can get some answers. The next question is from Greg. Has the EIDL advance been limited to $1,000 per employee and not $10,000?
Yeah, Greg, that is correct. So, when the program was first rolled out Greg, I'd say with both of these programs, and I'm sure you've experienced this personally. I mean, there was just, frankly, there's just a lot of confusion all around. I mean, these programs were rolled out very quickly, and the intent was to get money into folks' pockets as quickly as possible. And because they were rolled out so quickly, there were a lot of changes made along the way. So initially, the understanding was that grant was $10,000, and then later it was clarified that it's up to $10,000, and that's really based on $1,000 per employee. And I'm sure a lot of that had to do with just the demand for this program and trying to help as many owners and contractors as possible.
Okay, so there's one more question from Edna. I initially applied for the EIDL, but did not do it properly and did not get a confirmation number. I would like to reapply. Do you know, A, if or when they will start taking new applications? And B, how will I know if I have done it correctly this time around?
Great question. I think Steve Barkoff has some firsthand experience here. I think he can give us some great perspective.
Yes, Edna. I would suggest that you stay connected to your local fishing partnership navigator. As soon as those applications open up again, they will definitely know about it and can forward that information along to you. And a great way of knowing that you've done it correctly is to sit down with your local navigator and do the application together. They have a lot of experience now with those applications. And if they feel like they need some assistance from me or John, they will include us in that session with you. So I would say take advantage of that opportunity.
So there's one more question that's come in, and I think this relates to both the loans. Why do 1099 crew members not count as employees? First, applications seemed like they would count as employees, but then further guidance says they do not count.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the answer is that 1099 workers were allowed to apply for these benefits on their own, and that's why they didn't want employers to be counting them also. It could result in double counting for those 1099 workers.
All right, so I think we have gotten through all of the questions in the chat and in the Q&A section. So I think we can move on to the next.
Cool. Thank you, Morgan. And thank you all for submitting your questions. As I've said on several occasions, if there are any questions that come up that didn't get answered, by all means, reach out to your navigator. We're here to help you out. And with that said, if you see on your screen now, there are a variety of resources that you can avail yourself to. And as Dan Orchard unmutes himself and brings us up to speed, we're going to close things out with the information of how you can get in touch with your navigator. So Dan, take it away.
Thanks, Tom. Again, this pandemic unemployment assistance just came out 2 days ago, and we're really going to work hard. We've got these questions written down that people have asked, and we've already gotten some questions from our navigators directly from fishermen, these specific ones having to do with what to do with your personal financial situation. And we have a contact at BUA that we're going to be working through this week, and we're going to start putting up these frequently asked questions on our website, as Ann mentioned, to try to answer these as best we can for you. So we hope this is one of the services that provides that level of financial assistance that people with immediate financial needs are able to obtain. So we want to do everything we can to take advantage of this. With the PPP and the EID, we'll still be standing by as this gets refunded, and we'll keep working on it. So again, thanks to our panelists for providing this information today. Thanks for everyone for listening in, and we will continue to do this weekly. If you have ideas for us and other questions that you need answered, please let your navigator know, and we'll keep providing the information that we can. So be safe out there. Thanks, everyone. That's all I have. Thanks, Tom.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. And thank you again, panelists, for all the help and answers that you supplied for us. And thank you for joining us here. We're going to be here every week at 10 o'clock. Be sure to join us. If there are any things that you didn't hear about, talked about today, reach out to your navigators or go out to the web and let us know. We're here for you. With that said, why don't we end things up, and you all have a great rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye now.